got to win the championship with a team that you feel.
I don't like losing money. I hate losing money on flips.
Know what your strengths are. Know what your weaknesses are.
Devin, if you want to grow, you're going to lose money this year.
You can't always start swapping someone out because you don't like them.
I'm honored to introduce Rich McDaniel. Rich is a Navy veteran, seasoned real estate professional, entrepreneur, and he is the founder of RentRisk.
You got to grow where you're planted.
I love that, Rich.
And so that's another thing for an entrepreneur. You just know what your strengths are.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Diehard Entrepreneur Stories. I am your host, Devin Ramos, and today I'm honored to introduce Rich McDaniel. Rich is a Navy veteran, seasoned real estate professional, entrepreneur, and he is the founder of RentRisk, a comprehensive tenant screening platform. With 29 years of distinguished military service, Rich commanded the USS Sterett and Naval Station Norfolk. His leadership extended to strategic roles with the Joint Chiefs of Staff and public leadership programs at Washington University in St. Louis. And since transitioning from the Navy, Rich has brought his expertise to real estate. Aside from his company, RentRisk, he is also the proud co-owner of Command Properties, a real estate company where he helps clients navigate buying, selling, and property management. His story is one of growth, redefining success, and living life on his own terms. And today he's here to talk about it. Rich, welcome to the show.
Hey, Devin. Great to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. You retired out as a captain in the Navy, right?
Mm-hmm, correct.
I think a lot of people are familiar with the Army. So that is an 06, right? So in the Army, it's a general officer. In the Navy, it's a flag officer, or it's one below a general officer.
Colonel in the Army, captain in the Navy, but it's an 06, yeah.
It's an 06, right? So it's one below flag officer, right? Like it's like all that to say you had a long, prestigious career, and it's sort of a testament to your leadership, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had a good time, and I had a guy tell me one time, he was like, "When it's time to get out, you'll know." And so I just had fun, enjoyed working with sailors and the commands I was in, and it was an arduous career. I was a surface warfare officer, so my first 20 years in the Navy were at sea.
Oh, wow.
Other than the time that I had like in a school, preparing for the tour, or when I went to war college one year. But other than that, I had a tour as a detailer, which, we're like an assignment officer issuing orders. But darn near the first 20 years of my adult life, from where I went in, I was at sea. So
you were at sea, man. And did you have that? Did you know that was in the cards for you when you first joined?
I didn't go to the academy. I went through ROTC from what's now University of Memphis. It was Memphis State when I went there. And I initially was attracted to, I had thought about maybe going in the Marine Corps. And, but I will tell you, I wasn't the most mature student, and I just kind of would wing it with my grades. And, I had a decent, I could get by with about a B average, a 3.0, 3.2 without studying a whole lot. And so that's what I did. I did enough to get by. And then, I think the leadership there, you kind of, the cream rises to the top, and those guys that I was in the Top Gun age. And so those guys that really had the great GPAs and all that, they went naval aviation. And then the rest of us were kind of, fodder for what other assignments were left. And so, I went and I got in a little bit of trouble academically with some of my physics courses and some trig that I was taking, and basically got recycled. I had a guy tell me, he was like, "Hey, you're never going to make it. You might as well go ahead and quit." And so I'm the kind of guy, I'm negatively motivated. And so all he had to tell me, "Hey, you're never going to make it." And, I'm like, you know what, I'll show you. And so I started applying myself and got a commission, and I graduated with about a 3.0 GPA. And then, which was, enough to get a commission and go in. But again, I was driven to get to that commission. And then I went surface warfare and went through the schools. But, like the military, it builds confidence. It teaches you leadership. You learn to deal with people. You learn from your own mistakes. And so I would say my career in the service was me doing that. And then you kind of grow into a lot of the roles, and you see as they mature you and push you on, if you hang around and you do well, and which every tour I did well, I was able to listen and work with people well. And I think that was my big reason for success, is that I could work with people. And so anyway, I did that and ended up, before you knew it, it was 20 years. I was commanding a ship and having fun. And then I went on to command our base after that. So it was a good time.
Yeah. It sounds like it for sure. And you had said something a minute ago about a friend had once told you something to the effect of, when it no longer becomes, fun, like you'll know. And that took you all the way to 29 years, correct?
I know you and I talked a little bit before, but, kind of my come to Jesus moment was, we have 5 kids, my wife and I. And so my oldest son, I was serving and I was just wrapping up my tour at Norfolk. And after that, in the Navy, all the services are this way, but it's kind of like, what job do you get that would position you to go on to make flag, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Norfolk is one of those jobs. They put people in that could potentially make flag. And then I went to run security forces and some other operations forces for the Navy. And I was in that job only for about 10 months. And it was during that time my son started having seizures, my oldest son.
Oh, no.
And so we were like, what's going on here? And initially, he was in the working out, and we thought it was from something, the supplementation, all that. Well, long story short, it was a brain tumor.
Oh, no.
He had surgery. Okay. He recovered just fine. He's married with a kid now. But, as my wife and I, one of the things I can tell you, if your child's going through that, and at the time he was 24, so he was out of the house. But, your kid's still your kid. And if one of the worst things you can do, if like a brain tumor or something that comes up, don't get on Google.
Start searching it. Oh, man.
Yeah, because your mind will run with that. And but anyway, we got him the right care. He had a great surgeon, a great brain surgeon. But what that did, it made me stop. It stopped me dead in my tracks. And if I would have gone on, again, there's no guarantee I even would have made flag officer, but I know I would have been competitive. Mm-hmm. But we had to ask, kind of like, well, what are we doing? It was one of those moments where we say, I've been away for X number of years out of our marriage. My kids, we did try, my wife and I just had our 33rd anniversary, and we're happily married. And
congrats, man.
Yeah. So,
it's amazing.
So we're proud of that, and it's good. And it took work, it took, we have 5 kids that we all they're great people, and we have a great relationship with them. But you come to that point where when Rich, my oldest son, was sick, we were like, what are we doing? If I hang around and then go command a region somewhere in the United States of bases, what will that look like? And the thing is, you can, anywhere in the military, I don't care what echelon of command you're at, you can look around for someone that's doing what you're doing, and you realize, hey, I could be doing that. So what kind of lifestyle do they have?
Yeah.
And you can really evaluate it, see what the drawbacks are. And, and much like entrepreneurship in the military, mentorship is key. And so at that time, I just started working for the head of logistics in the Navy as his EA. And that started, he had surgery. The admiral I was working for was great. He was like, yeah, go take care of your family. And just through that whole experience, we came back, and I didn't even tell my wife. We were just having these conversations. Then I went in one day and told my admiral, I'm like, it's time. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm tendering my resignation. And he was like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, it's time. So, wow. Yeah, and then after that, you gotta, it's like when you get out, it's like, what am I going to do? And we all serve with those guys, or had those guys working for us that says, I have this job where I'm going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars, or I got my family that's going to do this for me. I'm going to do that. But, and you see where a lot of times they end up staying in or hanging around or coming back because they don't have a plan. No matter where you are, you're kind of faced with the same thing. And so I was faced with that of, hey, what am I going to do now that I'm getting out? So
it sounds like you kind of took it step by step. First realization, I guess, was, hey, it's time for a change of lifestyle. And it wasn't like you knew it was entrepreneurship. You just kind of took that step and then you had to figure out what's next. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, well, for us, the thing is, my wife, when I was in command of my ship in San Diego, she had been mentored by a lady in real estate, and this lady ran a company, and this lady did it right.
Yeah.
And so when Angie, we transferred to the Northern Virginia area outside of DC, and I started at Brookings doing the Sec Dev Fellowship and doing all that. She was starting her real estate company. And that was 2013. And so from 13, even when I transferred down to Norfolk, she was still commuting up here twice a week.
Oh, wow.
Building a real estate company.
Yeah.
So she's pretty entertaining to interview as well on some of the stuff. But we had gotten to a point where by the end of my tour at Norfolk, she was making more money in real estate than I was in the Navy.
Wow.
And so that definitely influences you on, hey, what do I do? And, as an 06, you can retire and become what's called a Beltway bandit. And those are the contractors that work for, there's tons of defense contractors, the big ones, then you have all these smaller tier contractors. And, at a minimum, you're going to make about $200,000 a year. And some guys, can push 300 depending on, what they do and getting in, and if they want to go on to leadership positions within those companies. And so that with your retirement, it's a nice living, right? And so I don't like
comfortable life
for that. But that just wasn't for us. We were, I for various reasons, we were like, hey, I'm ready to punch out, distance myself from DoD from a little bit and do my own thing. It wasn't safe, right? That was kind of our safe route. And so we were like, hey, let's do something different. And so that's really what caused us to get out of the Navy, say, okay, hey, I'm going to try and do something complementary to what you're doing in real estate. It really helps that. And so that's how we started down this path.
I love that, Rich. Your foot into real estate came by way of your spouse, or did you sort of have like your own desire to get into real estate aside from her? Was it like, because you guys have 33 years together. So I can imagine maybe there's a part of you that's like, I want to do this with her, and I'm saying that because I shared that with my wife. We're both entrepreneurs.
My wife's very talented at what she does. And like I said, she had built a successful real estate business where she helped people buy and sell, and the property management portfolio. Now we have basically, since I've gotten out, we've doubled that portfolio.
Oh, wow.
Actually it's more than double. And, part of that was just the uncertainty that you lead in the military life. You don't, like for me, I moved 21 times over my career. Sometimes you move to the location you lived before, but you're always moving around. And, I had a desire in real estate to jump in it, but, my wife really developed a reputation for screening tenants to an exceptional level. And so she kept having all these realtors that would come to her and say, can you screen my tenants? And she would do it. It was kind of a loss leader for her. She would do it because our management software is AppFolio, and you can set up a fake property and screen via that.
Oh, right. Okay.
But it really wasn't profitable. So we said, you know what, let's start a screening company. And so I'm like, well, I can drive stuff. I can drive projects. I know how to do that. So there was another gentleman that I started it with, and he's like, hey, I've always wanted to do a tenant screening company. So he and I dove in together. We tried to take my wife's knowledge and then put it in this tech platform that we could then scale and go nationwide with. And so that's what we've done. That's what we've built out. And so we're really good on that platform at screening holistically. And that's how it was birthed. And, and now I'm trying to grow it into other things like paying rental payments and doing some of the other cool stuff that some of these other platforms do. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Starting to really dev it out. That's pretty neat. Man, you said something really important here that I think is really cool. And as you talked about your wife has a skill that's extremely valuable. And it's like you guys working together, you saw how valuable that skill was. And you're like, I'm going to take my skills, which is to drive projects and, all your leadership and all that stuff that you've built up over these, 29 plus years in the military and everything before that. And now we're going to build something, with that. I love that, thinking about it for myself, because one of the things I do is invest in properties. I hold a lot of real estate. And when I'm looking at property managers, there's only really like two things that I really care about. It's how quick they can get it turned over and can they get a good tenant in there. And, the 6%, 8%, 10% a month, whatever, I don't even really care about that. There's going to be other fees, but the fees, the monthly percentage, all that stuff that I'm paying I really only care about those two things. So in my opinion, I'm paying all this stuff, but I'm not paying for them to fix the toilet and answer the phone and I don't really care about that stuff. I'm glad they do it. But what I really care about is how quick can you turn my property and get a tenant in there? And is it a quality tenant? So you saying that about your wife, I know right there. I'm like, oh, dude, she's going to crush it with that skill, because it is so valuable.
In 12 years that she's been doing this, we've never had a late payment. We've never had a destroyed property, and we've never had an eviction. And so
that's insane.
And that is thousands of people that have been screened.
Yeah.
And so, people will ask us, well, what do you do during an eviction process? And we're like, well, we have a good attorney, but I really can't tell you because we haven't gone down that path. And, so it is really valuable. And that's we try and raise the bar, and usually in property management, the standards are low. And so we've tried to really raise the bar there. And the same thing with tenant screening, try to raise the bar there. And I think that's one thing, as a veteran, especially if you serve where the standards have to be exact and you have to have high standards and you have to be incredibly proficient and competent at what you do. That's a good skill to transfer over to whatever you do in the entrepreneur world, and so that's what we've really tried to take. Like my wife, she employs all military spouses. And many of them, not all of them, because some in property management, you got to have boots on the ground, but many are distance, they're remote. And so it's been great, but it's been a good complement to what I've done with the tech company, to what she does with the screening, because Automatic, I have a test platform of properties and people that can use our tech platform to put stuff out. So.
Well, Rich, I want to take just a little bit of a step back. You had this 29-year stint. You were a high-ranking officer within the military, getting used to operating a certain way, doing business a certain way. I can imagine, this is just me being a veteran. I got out as an E7, right? So E7, Devin Ramos gets out. Seeing an 06 go from what the general position looks like, management, thousands of people under them, to, all right, now I'm going to help build this business. What was that like for you? What were some of your hangups?
I think every veteran, no matter what your rank is, there's a little bit of struggle when you retire, when you get out, right? Because so much of what you do in the military, I think, is based on performance. You're in a system and you have to perform at a high standard in that system to do well. And when you become an entrepreneur, you have to make the system, and then you have to perform yourself. And so, and you're right. I mean, at Norfolk, it's the biggest Navy base in the world, and there's tenant commands, and you're not in command of all those commands. You're kind of like the mayor, if you will. You keep the facility, right? You run the security. I ran the port, ran the airfield. So all those people that run those things report to you. So, you have roughly 2,300 on your staff, not 2,300 direct reports, but you have a lot of direct reports. And so, I only say that because your identity and what, it's wrapped up in being, a Navy captain, doing those things, running that, and then you get out and you have to find your own way. And I think every veteran, deals with that. And you have to be confident in yourself and be confident in what you're doing, and that's sometimes hard, because I think we're wired as people to be in a tribe, to be in a group where we have some kind of role and we have some kind of value based on that role. And then when you separate from that, it's sometimes challenging. There's a book I read by Sebastian Junger. It's called Tribe. And he's the guy that wrote The Perfect Storm that was made into the movie. And but in this book, he talks about, in early America, you had the colonists. And he says that as they push west, many times the Native American tribes might kidnap some of the colonists and they would put them in a tribe. And he goes, 2-3 years later, these people would be, quote, repatriated to their normal way of life. And over 50% of the time, these people chose to stay with the tribe.
Wow.
And he poses the question, why does that happen? And it happens because, these people had a role, they were valued. And you see that in the military. I mean, how many times did you see guys we're serving with, and they're really, they do something, they do it well, and they're valued for their role in a platoon or in a division, whatever the case may be, whatever echelon of command. Then if they get out and they leave that, sometimes they're lost. And you see guys that will separate only to come back in and say, hey,
yeah, I'm
really happy right here. And then, so it just speaks to the nature of, as people, it's really important that we find that place for us where we can add value, either serving other people. And as an entrepreneur, it's sometimes a lonely journey. And so, we got to prepare people, for that, the reality of what that journey is. And that's probably was my biggest struggle. It's like, it's, you're doubting, you're building this and you're having to put money and time and you're not getting that reward back immediately. And you have your spouse, but no one's there to like pat you on the back or say, hey, this is great. And so I got involved in another mastermind, which was valuable, and so you have other people and you hear them as they're talking on the mastermind, or you're hearing who's leading the mastermind. They're sharing their struggles. One of the biggest affirmations for me was, I remember going in that mastermind and hearing Mark, the guy that leads it. He goes, if you don't want to lose money, then don't come here. He goes, because I've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars on doing entrepreneurial endeavors. And so it just went to show me, I'm like, all right, I need to try and do this smart, but sometimes you go down a path and, you might end up not doing like what you're expecting to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, it's
100%. I think, you saying that, I was just thinking about, I like to journal. I've been journaling for a few years, and this year I've really picked it up. And, when I look back in my journal over, let's say maybe the last 6 or 8 months, my external for the most part hasn't changed. I'm growing. So as it goes with growth, you got bigger and bigger problems. But my internal, my mindset has sort of shifted a little bit. And when I look at it and I'm looking at the journaling and I'm like, man, what's kind of changing here? A lot of it for me really boiled down to almost this expectation I set for myself. So here's what I mean by that, because you brought up losing money. I had this, it seems silly, but because I had a real estate company for a few years prior to this, or a couple years prior to this. But like, I don't like losing money. I hate losing money on flips. But the mindset shift that I had went from, I don't want to lose money on this flip to, hey, Devin, if you want to grow, you're going to lose money this year. And so this might be the one, but let's get it out of the way and let's keep moving on. And so what I mean by the expectation changing is it's almost become now like, okay, hey, if you're going to do this, there's a cost, and losing money is part of that cost. So let's just be smarter. So maybe I stay a little more liquid, or maybe I bump up my reserves, but like get over it, that sort of thing. And that's what I heard a little bit in you. But for me, that's really what started to shift this year as an entrepreneur. And I feel like for me, I don't know if it is, but I feel like it's part of like maturing as an entrepreneur. Like I'm now realizing like, hey, this next year, someone's going to burn me and it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
I'm going to lose some money. I'm going to make some bad decisions. Now I'm going to try not to, but it's going to happen. And let's kind of plan for it. And then we'll handle it as it comes, but we'll stay consistent and we'll see the other side one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah. I will tell you, one of the other things that you're expressing to me, kind of what I've come to, the reality. Part of my other drawback, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs get this, is I was in there. One of the reasons I lost money was because I had the shiny object syndrome as well. Like, it's you see something that there's tons of opportunity, and you're like, hey, I'll run down this path. And so I had to learn that I had to keep my main thing the main thing. My wife and I had to decide, hey, what is it that we're good at? What is it that we really want to invest our time and money and resources in, and build relationships and all the things that you need to do to be successful? And so we have our main things now. We have real estate, we have our property management portfolio, we have our tech platform, and then we're doing things under those really that are really going to increase our margins, expand our business. And we're building relationships around all that, right? And
there's synergies there, right?
There's huge synergies, but it took us a while to say, okay, because I'll give you a great example. When the ERC, the Employment Retention Credit, came out, I was like, well, I'll sign up. Maybe I know other entrepreneurs or business owners. Maybe I'll help them do that. For me, that was a distraction. Other guys, I know they did it and they did it well, and it was complimentary, but for me, it was the distraction. Partly is where I was in my journey. And so I just encourage anybody that's watching this, like, know the value that you bring to the table, and you bring a lot. Like, as a veteran, you're bringing a lot. You're bringing leadership, the way you think, your persistence, how you work with teams. I can name a lot of attributes that veterans bring to the table. And I got a buddy of mine that now he serves at a very high level in one of the big real estate brokerages. And he goes, in commercial real estate. And he goes, if I can get a professional athlete or a veteran, I snatch him in a heartbeat, because I know they're going to be successful based on how they operate. And so I would just tell veterans, like, be confident with what you bring to the table. You bring a lot of value. People want to work with you. You have traits that you really, exude that people want on their team. They want to do business with people like you, and be confident with that. And then focus on those main things. What those main things, that don't get too divided. Focus on those main things, and I think you'll see yourself start thriving.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny you say that, Rich, because Yeah, I realize that too. Even something as simple as email. I never worked in the corporate world, or I didn't really work behind a computer in any other job I had outside the military. And so then when I got out, now running these companies, I'm hiring people. Not everybody I hire is a vet. And so I find myself, some of them are entry level, some of them it's like their second job, but like teaching people how to communicate through email the right way. And I'm just like, and I say the right way to my standard, right? Because in the military, we have a very high standard, especially for somebody like you working up at the Pentagon. You're working with, oh my gosh, like let the State Department laugh at the military for an email, right? Like that doesn't happen. And so that standard is just so much higher. And I remember just thinking like, man, when I hire a vet, I don't even have to explain that. Like they understand it. So.
There's so many things culturally that are imparted if you have a vet, vice if you don't. And that's not to say that there aren't quality people outside of veterans.
Sure.
Obviously there are. I mean, you see, really talented people making tons of money and running incredible businesses. But yeah, veterans, what they bring, 10% of all entrepreneurs are veterans. And so think about, how the U.S. is built, the economy is built on a large part of a small business. That's an incredible number.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Right. And so veterans are doing something right. Something is translating. And I will tell you, I've never met a veteran that likes being told what to do. Like in the military, you're around a bunch of guys, they hate being told what to do, but they know they get the construct of the military. They know what it takes to succeed. They thrive in teams and they go make it happen. And so they can take an order, but most of those guys that are successful, they can step up and lead when they need to step up and lead. But seriously, I mean, I don't care if it's taking an E7 from the Army, you separate him, you take him in his personal life, tell him what to do, and he's going to be like, he's not going to like that. You take an 06, he's not going to like to be told what to do, right? I mean, there's a certain level of, I think, leadership that these veterans bring, that they can take charge and move out, which is a great skill, obviously, in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, man, you hit the nail on the head there. And that so resonates with me too. For the longest time, I thought there was something wrong with me. Even when I was younger, these jobs, I did not like being told what to do. I wanted to be told what needs to get done. I'm not the boss. I'm not in charge. Tell me what needs to get done, and then I'll figure it out. And that led into the military, and very, very similar, whether I was working for an 06 like yourself, or, I was working with a peer. It's like, hey, just tell me what you want done, and then I'll figure it out. Or let's talk about what the plan is, and then I'll figure it out. And so it was like a breath of fresh air. It was also frightening, but like a breath of fresh air once I kind of got out of the military. And now I'm at this point where, I'm just like, no, I will never go back to that again. I almost think of it as like, I have too much potential to fulfill. I have too much to offer. Let me be free. Yeah. And, a lot of vets are very similar in that way. And so to your point, I think that's why that the very high autonomy is why vets make good entrepreneurs, and they also make, really awesome employees too.
Yeah. And, I think another thing that you'll find from guys, there's nothing more, it's like being thrown in cold water, shocking. And when you get in the military and you realize you're like, wow, I'm kind of like another number here, right? And what I'm getting at is that there have been that time where we've been in the masses of people. I don't care if you're officer enlisted, and go in your local, we call them a PSD, or go to the S1 and try and get a pay issue resolved as an E3. If you want to feel unimportant, that can make you feel unimportant, right? So vets come out of there knowing what it takes to enfranchise a person, make them feel valued, bring them into the team. like, cause you've seen bad leadership or you've seen bad environments. And you're like,
Yeah.
I don't want that in my company.
Yeah.
I want people to be valued. I want people to be listened to. I want to take the advice of people that might, and I realize too, I'm like, I'm not Superman, like I guarantee you, your God-given abilities, you're much better at doing things than I would be on certain things. And the way God made me, I'm much better at doing certain things than you are. But if we can bring that together and listen to one another, we can make an incredible team. And so I think that's the value of serving in the military is man, and we can take that and apply that and have a killer business.
So I'd love to hear more about how you've really been able to implement that, or I guess work through that with your spouse, because man, you're coming out of the military, you got this identity shift, you got a shift in roles, and then also now you're also working with your spouse, which I don't know if you had any background in that, but for me, my wife and I, we went through this whole thing. I was very, very high op tempo. And so I had to learn to live with my wife when I first stopped deploying. So I can only imagine what it was like for you and working directly with your spouse.
I think it's the nature too of, I know the Army, and even though we're quote a garrison force in the Army, the op tempo of the wars was so high, the guys were gone like deployment after deployment after deployment. Like literally, they would come home to go train and work up to deploy again. I had friends that were doing that, whether it was Marines or the Army and the Navy. The Navy, that's the constant cyclical nature of the Navy. You go to sea and you train up at sea, you deploy at sea, obviously. And so you're rarely home. And so as a result of that, your spouse they're the accountant of the house, right? They're the person that runs the kids to the sports. They get the groceries. You name it, they do it. And so then, inject, Captain McDaniel back into the household with Angie McDaniel, and man, there was fireworks when I first entered, because it was, and you got to understand, my wife and I are aligned on faith, we're aligned on family, we're aligned on finances. So many of the key things that people say, hey, cause divorce, and I personally enjoy. I'm best friends with my wife, so. But I say all that, it wasn't like utopia, right? It was hard. And it wasn't just the difference that we find between differences in men and women, how they communicate. That was part of it. But it was me now jumping into her world. And she had a way that she did stuff with the real estate company that had been very effective. And then here I come, like, consultant McDaniel, right? And it wasn't always well received. And so we worked through it. But I'll tell you, it was a challenge, man. And I've been out now about 3 years, and it can still be a challenge at times, but we've pretty much hit our stride. I would chalk it up to now the differences that we have are just how we communicate, because I can't just bark orders or say, hey, yeah, I want, there's a method. There has to be a method behind my madness. Same with her. We've learned a lot about each other's personalities. Just, I think out loud. I'm one of those guys that I annoy a lot of people because I speak to think.
Sure. Yeah.
And
that's how my wife is.
Yeah.
She does that too.
And so there's people that, like, my wife was more introverted. So she's like, why are you saying that? And and I'm like, well, I'm thinking out loud. And so there was a lot we had to work through, but if I can encourage anybody, just keep at it. Just don't give up. It's the same thing with our entrepreneurial journey. Same thing with that. Just don't give up. Be patient, be loving, be forgiving. All those things that you need to do to make a marriage successful. That's what made our working together successful. and she ultimately, when I could explain to my kids when they were in the house and they were growing up, I ever had to discipline them. I'm like, I'm telling you this because I care. Like I said, there's two people in this world that care about your success, and that's your mother and I, and I'm like, that's why I'm telling you this. That's why I'm disciplining you. And so I would have to tell my wife something very similar. Obviously, I never disciplined my wife.
Sure.
She would kill me. but if we had a disagreement, I'd have to say, well, I'm coming at this because, I care. I love you. I want us to be successful. It's not because I just want it my way. I see it a particular way. And she's like, here's how I'm coming from. So when we could actually talk and be constructive and it wasn't emotional and you're not yelling at each other, that's when it was really fruitful. But it took time, man. It took time. I mean, the first year we love each other dearly, but the first year we had to work through a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I can imagine, like I said, similarly, the op tempo you were talking about, that was my op tempo, right? So when I say I had to learn to live with my wife, I quite literally mean that, because I had spent more time living in other countries and other states training than I did with her. And then you insert, okay, now we're going to work together on building this company. That was our cleaning company. And man, the fireworks ensued. But I agree with you. I think one thing that I hear in you, and I know that this has helped us, is the underlying commitment. Like we don't question the commitment to each other. And as you were talking about service members and veterans and how we make great entrepreneurs and things like that, I was thinking, that's one thing that we really learn in the military is commitment, right? Like whether it's commitment to that officer because they're in charge and we understand the way it works, or it's commitment to the mission, that it's there. It's like there is not this thought of not committing or like the mission not being successful, even when it's a complete crap show, still pushing forward to achieve mission. And I think that becomes so ingrained in you at a certain point. Like for me as an entrepreneur, I think that when I look around myself and I see a lot of successful people, successful at different rates, maybe it took 10 years to build this company, maybe 5, maybe 15, but all of them were committed and stuck through the storm, and I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but I think a lot of weight rests on just being committed and seeing it through, kind of like you had pointed out with your marriage.
Yeah, I think, I'll quote Jamie Tilka, because he, in our military to entrepreneur group, he said, entrepreneurship is a selection process within itself. And I love that because, we can strive, but I think sometimes a veteran might hang on so long that you might have to tell them to quit. Like, if your financials aren't making sense after year 5, you might want to reevaluate how you're doing business. But so I'm not saying just, blind luck and just never quit, but I'll tell you that trait is what is needed in entrepreneurship, because the first 3 to 4 years, you're going to be feeding this thing with your time, with your energy. You're your own staff, you're your own employees, you're doing the things that you need to, and so, it was the best thing ever. We have a real estate team on our property management company. We've built that out. We're successful because my wife has built an amazing team. So for me to then in RentRisk, we were able to hire 2 of those women for some tasks, and that was the best day of my life, because in RentRisk, the tenant screen, you have to comply with the Fair Credit Reporting Act. You have to go through compliance inspections. It's like a bank exam because you're looking at people's credit, and I hate that stuff. Like I'm a big strategic thinker. The military taught me how to go into details, but I like sticking up at 20,000 feet.
Yeah.
So when we could put that person there this gal named Melissa, and she helped me out. It was like a godsend, man. I was like,
oh
yes.
man.
So, but I mean, those are the kind of things. So like I was having to do things that were not my strength, operate in areas that, and so that's another thing for an entrepreneur. Like, you just know what your strengths are, know what your weaknesses are, and you obviously, when you start out, you're the man doing everything. And unless you can have another business that kind of feeds it, which was somewhat with us but it couldn't feed it entirely. We had to make some money on the tech company, or I would have bled myself dry, right? But know your strengths and weaknesses, and that way you kind of know what you need to shore up, and you know what you can push on yourself. Eventually, you're going to get your business to the point where you want to hire a team and thrive, and so you're running the business, and the business is not running you, right? So that's where you want to go.
Yeah.
And I know how to do that. I know, through levels, I know how to delegate. I know, but you're having to do all that. So that's the great equalizer is entrepreneurship, right? I mean, everybody has the road to hoe. So it'd be tough.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about that. And I can imagine from your military experience, you're seeing a lot of that strategic view, right? And you understand how to operate in that, like, no issues. But you didn't build it from, just you and two people all the way up to that. So you didn't see all those phases. And as an entrepreneur, that you essentially are like, you're going back to square one, and you were all the S shops, you were everything.
Yeah, what we were saying earlier, we hit this earlier, is that, the military puts you in a system that exists already. You just need to perform. You need to understand kind of your left and right limits, and you need to perform. You understand what levers to pull, and you can do really well. And the more adept you are at understanding that and quicker, the more you thrive in a military community, right? And no matter what it is. But entrepreneurship, you're building that system. That system doesn't exist. You're building the accounting, and the payroll is part of that. You're understanding your expenses. You're keeping the records. So you're your own admin. So it's really, and many of those things are not my skill set, but you have to do it, and you have to do it somewhat effectively. And so there is an aspect, I think, of life and experience that helps you with being an entrepreneur. In terms of money management and organizational skills and how to lead people. But I mean, it's not a get out of jail free card. It's you still got to go do the work, and you still got to pay the dues, so to speak, and you're starting from scratch, and so it's tough.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, Rich, when you come into the property management company, you guys already had something built. You helped build it out, working hand in hand with your wife in that, if I understand that correctly. And then from there, you guys decide, hey, here's an opportunity here. We're basically going to take this skill that we have and turn it into a tech platform and serve a bunch of other people and bring them that value, right? What was that like? Because you're going from no entrepreneur experience to, all right, I'm kind of filling it out. I'm in the real estate industry, and now you're jumping into tech. What were your hangups doing that, if any? I've never worked in a tech startup. I've never started one, obviously. But I'm curious to know.
I think I had the confidence that I could go in and do a project from, cradle to grave. From my experience in the military, is that, there's so many times you're told, hey, put together a team and do X, Y, or Z. Right. When I was in command of a ship, I came off deployment, and then, you lose. We had an incredibly high turnover. It wasn't 50%, but it was close to it. And then we had to turn around and deploy again after going through a yard period 4 months later. And so, given a problem set, you're like, okay, I can evaluate what's on the table, put people and things. And so I had some confidence in my abilities, and also knowing that as you go through things, you figure it out. You don't see a solution now, but you can, what do we get paid to do as leaders in the military? Solve problems. And so I'm like, all right, so I'll do that. And so I jumped in, and I didn't know the first thing about tech. And so I started calling, I'm like, I know I have to get credit reports. And so I started calling all the credit bureaus. And then I said, well, who handles these things? And I was on the web and looking for stuff. And so finally after interviewing TransUnion and Experian, we were in Experian, and I started going through and just working through compliance. And you're working through compliance as you're building out your platform. And all that, there's a verse in the Bible that talks about counting the cost. And I went in and said, hey, I'm going to do this without really knowing the cost. Like, I was kind of naive, and building this out was way harder than I expected. And especially on myself for that lack of knowledge, of not knowing the tech space, and literally like finding a developer. So knowing what I know now, I think God gave me my developer's a good guy. I trust him. He's honest. Not all developers are that way. And, not all of them from a skill level are created equal. And so I got a good developer, and I just kind of fell into that. And so, I think that skill, like I always told people in the commands I served with, I'm like, you got to grow where you're planted, and the team, you got to win the championship with the team that you field. You can't always start swapping someone out because you don't like them or because you don't feel like they have the right skill sets. You have to try and take those team members and put them in areas where you think they'll thrive, right? And so as I was going through this whole process, I had to go with the skill sets that I had, the developer that I found, working through with Experian, trying to put my team together, pull all this together, knowing what I had with projects. And it was hard. So I thought it would take me 8 months to a year to get through compliance and build this out. It took me almost 2 years before I even launched. And so that was working through a lot of stuff, man. I won't bore you with all those technical details, but much harder than I thought. If I was just doing my own technology, like not having to go through Experian and not having to go through compliance, that probably would have been more like 8 months to a year. But when you have to interface with someone else that's providing a key component, and you're having to comply with government regulations, that made it exponentially harder to get across the finish line.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying basically if it was like find a developer, create an app for, I don't know, tracking your mileage or something like that, it'd probably be significantly easier than what you're doing because of the compliance issues and the fact that you have to interface with the credit bureau, and you really only have so many to choose from. And then you got to basically adapt to their systems, I'm sure, or whatever the technical is behind that. Am I hearing that correctly?
I don't know the corollary in the Army. I know the corollary in the Navy for people that are really, really intelligent, like some of our nuclear community, very intelligent people, right? Some of those folks, not all of them, some of them are gifted in all those areas. They're gifted in leadership, they're gifted in people skills, and they're very intelligent. But a lot of them are just gifted in their smarts, and the Navy brings them in the service because they're particularly astute at, their math and science. And so that's how I felt with development, both on the Experian side and with our developers, is that you have to set goals and you have to drive things, right? These people they're great at writing code. They're great at, like, if you give them an idea, they translate it and say, okay, this is how it can function. But now it's you that's driving the problem, right? And so, they have tools like that. I'm not. I mean, I'm not saying that all of them are that's absent in that community at all. But I'm just saying, that was another dynamic. You have to own this, and you're driving it, and it's you. And so, and then the other thing with tech companies, and if anybody else out there is running a tech company, they don't know what I'm talking about. They're always changing. You never just launch a platform and it's static, right? It's like, hey, you get feedback from users. Hey, this wasn't great, or I got an error code here, or, it'd be great if this could say this. And so you're always changing something, always. It just, that's the nature of the beast. And I was a little bit naive with that as well. I thought I'd go in and you launch it and you're like, all right, whew, that's a win, but no, you're always changing it, man.
Yeah, that's funny. I think back to just you saying that reminded me of this. I think back to when I was a kid. I was like the tech kid in my family. And so, I grew up in the age of dial-up internet. We didn't have dial-up internet in my house. Then when we did, that was the first computer we had. And so, like, I installed the programs, like I did all the tech stuff, right? That was just me. Like, my parents didn't know how to do that. Nobody knew how to do that. And I remember, like, thinking as a kid, it was so funny, but I remember thinking, like, man, I don't understand the people that are always buying the newest computers and, like, the newest things. Like, how do you even keep up? It's like, by the time I could save enough money for the newest computer, there's already a new one out there. And so I just think about that in business. It's like, man, what do you do? Do you literally have to build a system around, like, just like R&D, or just like staying afloat? Like, what does that even look like in your company?
Well, for me, like, the biggest thing that we track is not with the latest updates. Like, my developer literally runs all that. Like, we have an account with AWS, Amazon Web Services. That's where we store a lot of our data, right? And then he does all the development. And then my biggest concern as a company is tracking compliance and then not getting sued,
right?
Because we don't do, last thing we want is have a violation of fair housing or the Fair Credit Reporting Act because we didn't present their data correctly. And then they got turned down for a property. So my world is compliance now, and then in terms of updates on the computer side, he takes care of all that. So,
okay.
It's a pretty good, this is where I can go back to my strategic view. I'm like, hey, I'd really like it to do X, Y, or Z, and he can go make it happen, and then we test it and make sure it's working right and what we intended. So
I love that. Yeah, that's so cool. Well, Rich, we've talked a lot about your property management company and RentRisk and a lot of, like, active, or what I imagine is like your active income. Have you also been, like, investing in real estate or doing anything to, like, really build your wealth? If so, could you tell me a little bit about that?
We had 2 Airbnbs. We had 2 properties and I've since sold. I sold one of those and then took my revenues from one of those and put it into the tech company, because the tech company just development is very expensive. And we've kind of been default landlords throughout. So we've always bought and sold properties. But no, I'm not actively trying to invest. It's something that I'll probably do in the future. What we try to do now is put a focus on building business as our wealth production.
Oh, I love that.
Right. And so, like, I'll give you an example. Like, one of the guys that I'm talking to, like, relationships are key, and the connections that you make around what you do are really key. And so, like, in property management, if you go to sell, which there's not a huge multiple, it's probably 1.5 to 3x what you earn in a year. And so, well, if I'm making $1 million, obviously I could sell it for 1.5 million to 3 million, right? And so what we're trying to do in some of these key relationships that I'm building is we're like, all right, well, if we don't do that, the discussions I'm having now is like, can we make a network, and can we put a network of property managers together? And then as we network these in standardized processes, and practices, and could we then turn around and sell the network of property management companies, all with different owners, for a 10x or a 12x, and then give a higher return to all of us? So that's the kind of thinking that we're trying to do in terms of networking and building wealth and thinking about exits. So, so it's not just the technology. I mean, people talk about having different streams of income. I've invested in some mineral rights stuff in Texas with oil. I've done some stuff, obviously, on this tech platform, put a lot of money and energy into that. Again, there's not necessarily guaranteed that'll pay off, but I think it will. And then our real estate and property management, we try and, capitalize on that, serve the veteran community through that, through the service that we give on the property management side. A lot of the veteran community, we help buy and sell real estate. So we're doing a lot of that to try and build our business for our wealth creation.
For me, the way I sort of articulated to people is like, right now, I'm really only putting money in one of three places at any given time. I'm putting it into myself, masterminds, getting into rooms with people that are doing things bigger than me, education, stuff like that. I'm putting it into my businesses, so, reinvesting like you are in your tech company. Or I'm putting it into real estate, long-term buy and hold stuff. So, I hear you putting it back into these companies and building them out. And it sounds like you're looking for an exit in at least in the property management, if not both the companies. Is that on the horizon for you at some point?
Yeah, I would say the property management is probably 4 to 5 years. We'll see how it goes. We have a number we want to have in production that in terms of annual revenues, and then for the a tech company, the multiple on a tech company is 10 to 15. So what we're trying to do there is build strategic partners, and that's something that I can tell is that if you can have an affiliate relationship, I knew very little, I experienced it, but never paid attention to it. But, affiliate marketing is pretty powerful. And so like we have a salesperson in RentRisk, and that's what they try and do is increase our revenues through affiliate marketing and building strategic partnership with investor communities, with listing sites, et cetera, et cetera. The biggest thing is, for us is trying to build out those relationships and go deeper with those relationships. And you just never know where, like I met a guy that, when I was trying to make a play for RentRisk, and he found out about our property management. He's just as interested in the property management in terms of some of the possibilities of where we could go and how we could network that. And I was led to him through RentRisk. So these relationships and these partnerships are huge. And so, the veteran community is pretty good about that because we're networked anyway. And this one guy that I'm talking about is not a veteran, but he sees the value in the veteran community. So, but it's been good, man. So that's what we're thinking in terms of long term. At some point, I'll get back to, because owning a property management, you see that property management is great for building wealth, but it's not necessarily a sexy thing. It's a hard thing. Like we see a lot of people that go into investment for properties, and around the 5-year mark, if they don't want to be a landlord, they're like, I'm ready to sell. Like, hey, this is way more expensive than I thought, or this is way more headache than I thought. And so then a lot of offload their properties at that point. So we kind of see that point, but we understand the value of that. That's one of the things that we're looking at, is to buy another property here in the near future. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Love it. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, Rich, man, it has been great getting to hear a little bit of your story and tons of insights that you've shared so far. Can you tell our audience where they can connect with RentRisk, how they can learn more about that platform, where they can connect with you as well?
Yeah. So RentRisk is, if you go to rentrisk.com, you'll see if you need to screen tenants and have a thorough screening and application process. If you have renters. So our avatar is a small property management company with 50 properties or less, or a real estate agent, or a small time investor. I mean, most people that own properties have 4 properties or less. And so we're the ideal platform. If you just need to go and you need a thorough screening for your tenant, come to rentrisk.com.
I was just going to say, and just to clarify on that, so like, let's say I got a portfolio of 20 properties or so, and I'm just struggling to screen tenants properly. I can basically use RentRisk to run my tenants through there. I don't got to worry about compliance. Like it's in compliance. Everything's good to go. And it's basically going to tell me like, hey, they meet this criteria. They're going to be good to go or not. Is that sort of the gist of it?
Well, so we don't make the leasing decision for you. So what we do is, we give you an application. It's a pretty thorough application that with an electronic link that can either be put with your listing or you can send it to your prospective tenant, right? You can send it to them via email, or if you have a listing on a certain site, most sites allow you, and there's a free text area that you could put a link in there and say, apply here. So we have that link, and then they will get a credit and criminal background report, and then that'll be shot back to you immediately as soon as they release it to you. They have to release it per the Fair Credit Reporting Act. They have to get permission to give it back to you. Then we tell you how to evaluate it. There's a leasing sheet we put on there, and we tell you what to look for. We tell you, because most people don't even know what a good or bad credit score is. They're just like, and to be honest with you, most property managers just say, I want people in here that's going to have, they set an arbitrary line. They say that's 680 or greater. And then they put the contract between the property management company and the leasee. You as the owner are usually left out. They don't usually consult you, because most of the time property management companies have, 1,000 to 4,000 properties. And so it's just, they don't want to consult with the owner. They're trying to do, and so an eviction is just a cost of doing business for them. So we're a little bit different in Northern Virginia. So if you ever have a property in Northern Virginia, call me up. We'll give you good management. But yeah, I mean, sure. So that's what RentRisk does is we'll tell you how to evaluate that data, and then the adverse action letter, we have automated processes. If you accept someone or if you have to decline them, we have automated processes that are in compliance with the law. You still have to check, because there's so many different localities where the law can vary, and states where the law can vary. I have a little guide in there, but you still have to check all these just to make sure you're complying, so. But that's what we do. That's what we do for people, is really tell you how to evaluate data.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So that's the real power of it. And again, y'all's unique ability, like you were talking about, you realized early on was your wife's specialty. So I love that, Rich. How about where our listeners can connect with you? What's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, it's rich@rentrisk.com or rich@commandproperties.com. Those are my 2 emails. I'm on social media too, but I'm not prolific. I got a Facebook and Instagram account, sure. but my wife's the one that does most of the posting there. So
cool. Very cool. Well, we'll go ahead and put it in the show notes so that our listeners have that. Well, Rich, man, I appreciate you so much for coming on. It has been a pleasure. I've really appreciated getting to know you, learn from you a little bit. So thanks again for coming on.
Absolutely, brother. This is it's been an honor for me to be here. I've enjoyed the conversation, and if you need anything else, or anybody in your audience needs anything, please reach out. I love to, if I can give any kind of insight or help. That's kind of how my wife and I are both wired. So we'd love to do that.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, y'all. You heard it from the source. Until next time, we'll see you.